Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to a very special showcase video. Today marks the official beginning of the second era of giants. Upon rediscovering a few Pennsylvania Railroad giants, I was inspired by them to make my own versions, and this is what's going to happen going forward. Any giant I make will be made in red with yellow lining to go along with the coaches I've made for the Coronation Scott. That will encourage me to keep these models. They won't be permanent, some of them will be subject to change, like the one on the left here. But I should definitely be better at treasuring these and keeping these built up in their same state. So yes, this is really happening. Giants are officially back on the railway. Since two locomotives are being shown in this video, let's start with the one that more people should be familiar with. So this was basically a giant version of the Streamlined Coronation. And this was initially built back in May, but it was kind of made as a one-off. Yes, it technically counts as a giant because it has two drive units, but I didn't classify it as much because I didn't want to get too many people excited. But recently, I had a bit of a kick and I thought to myself, you know what, I want to kind of make this better. So taking in inspiration from the Pennsylvania Railroad S1 and T1 locomotives, I've taken steps to make this a much better looking locomotive. So the boiler no longer has those chunky things along the side. The top of the boiler itself looks so much better. It's a more realistic looking locomotive. Again, it's fictional, but it definitely looks better to how it was previously. The cab area has been extended by about 4 studs, and the trailing wheels underneath the cab definitely have been improved. So it was so rinky-dink, and it was a bit tedious to kind of get this to go around corners. But thankfully this has been amended so it just looks and functions much better. This locomotive and the other giant does have a running number, which has its own significance meaning. I will let you all figure that out in the comments. Anybody who gets it correct will get a heart reaction. And my god, what a tender. So I was falling more in love with the American Railroad longer tender designs, and seeing what the T1 had, I had to have one. Simply put, I just had to make my own version. So this has a lot of wheels and there's a lot of flexibility and free movement in the middle 2 wheels for each bogie, so this can easily navigate R40 points and switches. Along the top is a reference to a streamlined design for the tenders, which I initially discovered through the Dreyfuss Hudson. So there are these flaps that you can close on the top of the tender that kind of make it look like this, to make the coal bed look smaller and therefore more aerodynamic. And it's actually really cool. It's a very clever idea. Now, because my coaches have corridors, I in turn need to give this tender a corridor. So you can see one side of the tender here is chunkier than the other, and that is to represent the corridor going from the cab to the front coach. And there were a few elements of the design here that I took from inspiration from other tenders, and overall I am really happy with this. The tender shape came together about a week ago, but there were a few minor tweaks that kind of just made it a little bit better as we went along. There were just, again, all those little tweaks, they all added up and made it just a better looking tender. Something that is way more worthy than the other tender I had the first time round. There really isn't that much left to say about this model because this did have its own dedicated showcase video back in May. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean this is a bit boring because I haven't said so much here, but at the same time I feel like just by looking at the model you get an understanding of what this is, because you can see a lot of the elements, a lot of the shapes that are used to make this design, and this is how I want to kind of make my giants going forwards. You'll see something similar with the next one, so why don't we just get straight to that. So this is the second giant to help kickstart the new era of giants, and the inspiration I gained for this particular locomotive was the Pennsylvania Railroad Q1. And this was a very cool design because I remember seeing this in the past. It is a duplex, it does have 2 separate drive units, the cylinders are on the outside, and it's all on one rigid frame. Now, the Q1 has an extra set of drive wheels, making it a 4-6-4-4, but for the sake of making sure this can navigate R40s, I am using extra large size drive wheels, and I only have 8 instead of 10. And yes, they are a dark grey colour instead of black or red, but that is because of the stock that I have. I still have those from the old days from when I made my W1, So to save myself some money, I just use them. They kind of work as well, because this definitely looks like a good mixed traffic engine, not just freight or just passengers. It definitely seems it can handle both. Another thing I wanted to do with this particular locomotive was try the bullet nose design again. So after making my Blue Goose model, I really loved that streamlined technique. It's not something I've done before, so I thought, you know what, if I'm going to make another model in the future, I would love to try and implement that. And this is the result. It's a custom design, so it's not the best, but I feel it is really good, again, for a custom design. The lining here gets a bit funky because in order for it to stay level with the coaches, I have to kind of go along here, but you can see this middle section where it kind of lifts up, so it isn't interfering with the handrails along there. And also so it lines up in the middle of the front nose section as well as the star. It's just cleaner like this. And just like with the other locomotive, this has its own running number. If you want to figure out what you think this means, then you can tell me in the comment section down below. Also, again, like the previous locomotive, this is a duplex. This is how I want to make my Giants going forward, where they don't have that many wheels. That way they are more contained, they're not so out of control, and it's just a nice design. It's nice to be able to use less wheels to accomplish what is ultimately the same look. And I can experiment with that sort of thing as well. I've got an idea for another Giant in the future, something a bit more steampunk-esque, but it's definitely going to be more self-contained and it won't be so crazy long compared to Emerald Champion and Big Red from back in the day. The tender I'm using for this particular model is the same tender I made for the previous Giant when I initially made it back in May. There is only one difference, and that's this front section here you can see is raised, and that is raised by 2 plates. That's to make sure I can make this tall enough to match the height of the main boiler unit. It's still technically 1 plate shorter if I put the top of this front section of the tender to the back of the cab roof. But, you know, 1 plate, that's not the end of the world. It doesn't really mean anything anyways. And yeah, it kind of saves me having to make a completely different tender, because this does look nice. But seeing how expansive that other Giant became, this one became a bit too small. And the last thing I want to do is have to scrap a model that uses lining, especially when it's got this much. I mean, you know, it's got Triton Lego Railway on it, for goodness sakes. That's a lot of lettering to just throw away. So thankfully, this has a good visual match with this new locomotive boiler. I put the two together, and here we are now. A second Giant is now finished. So there we have it. That is the end of this showcase video. Thank you all ever so much for watching. This was one hell of an announcement for me to make, and honestly, I wasn't too sure if I could commit to this, because my Lego train building skills have adapted since that era of Giants, but it was so much fun putting these models together. So that older side of me has now come back. I have ideas for future Giants, and I don't know how long it's going to be between each Giants model being made. Like I've said in the past, my boxes are getting pretty full, so anything I make with Giants is going to be interesting to say the least. There are length and height restrictions, but nothing that seems too impossible for now. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to get these on the layouts and get them running. So that's the next thing I suppose I need to do. But until then, thank you all ever so much for watching. I know a lot of people have wanted to see Giants return on my railway, and today is the day. You can all look forward to it together. It's going to be an absolute blast. At the top of the description is a link to my Discord server where you can join and chat with like-minded fans of Nerf blasters and Lego trains. Also in the description is a link to my Flickr and Instagram pages. Make sure you follow me on both of those for behind the scenes and sneak peek actions at current and future projects. Be sure to keep an eye on the community tab for polls and updates. Thank you all ever so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you all in the next episode. The Giants are back, baby. Oh yes.